Hello and welcome to the Center on Self-Employment, Business Ownership, and Telecommuting monthly webcast. My name is Ashlea Lantz, and I'm one of the staff at the center. Today, we are joined by Jennifer Scilacci from Colorado State DVR and Jim O'Brien with Washington State Vocational Rehabilitation. We'll be hearing both from Jennifer and Jim on their state's work around self-employment, and then we'll be breaking out in to have a discussion to wrap up our time together. Jennifer will start by sharing a little bit about Colorado. Jim will then share a bit about Washington State, and then we'll have some discussion questions. So thank you for joining this month's webinar, and we'll get started. Jennifer.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for this opportunity to share information about Colorado's self-employment program. I'm Jennifer Scilacci, as Ashlea said earlier, and I'm lucky enough to hold a few roles here in Colorado. One of them is our statewide self-employment coordinator. So I could talk about self-employment all day, and instead have about 15 minutes. So I'm going to dive right in to the next slide, and I'll be giving you an overview of DVR's self-employment program, and then kind of our process, how it works, and then what's going well, and maybe some challenges that we're experiencing in addition. So just a broad overview of our self-employment program. We have about 20 or more, depending, self-employment counselors all around the state of Colorado who focus on self-employment. They carry other caseloads, but they are trained and cover our self-employment cases. We also have 5 lead counselors for self-employment in different regions, and they also provide support for our overall self-employment counselors. And then finally, we have myself. Lucky enough, as I said, I love doing it, coordinating our statewide self-employment program, and I can provide support for all of the counselors, help to facilitate our quarterly trainings that we have with self-employment, as well as provide needed technical assistance often to our supervisors when they have self-employment questions or when cases might go towards appeal. We also, in our program, we do have a review process for those business plans that's structured, and I'll dive into that in a little bit. So back in 2018, we realized the time was right for us to really look at our self-employment program and how can we better it? How can we improve it? And so all of the self-employment counselors and myself and some other folks got together, and we identified a core team of folks who would really dive into how can we improve our self-employment program. And we did some of the typical things, right? We did a SWOT analysis of our program. And what we also did was hold in-person focus groups with our counselors, with a variety of stakeholders, including our vendors and the people we serve. And we also followed up with a survey monkey so we could get information in different ways. And so from all of that, we realized a few things. We had some opportunities. We could streamline our process and make it a little easier. We could perhaps provide more opportunities for youth and those folks in supported employment who want to explore self-employment. And what we really needed was better training. We realized that we had a huge gap in training and understanding of self-employment in general. So I want to give a huge shout out to the Rural Technical Assistance Center in Montana, who really helped us. And as we were beginning this process, so was Utah. And so that RTAC had been working on kind of a training manual for Utah, and we were lucky enough to be able to utilize a piece of that, and we modified it for Colorado. So we ended up with a full training and procedure manual that we never had before. And one of the other gaps we realized was like, we need like formal training for all of our counselors, because our counselors do so many different things, right? They have to be generalists. Some of them are specific to youth or maybe mental health, but they all at some point may touch self-employment. So we did a mandatory training for all of our counselors and supervisors, and a small team of us traveled around to all the different offices in the state, actually right before COVID came along, and had the opportunity to train on our self-employment program. So I think that was actually pretty critical. So our overall process, now that I've kind of gone through how we revamped, is we always have an eye towards policy and regulations, right? And so that we want to really make sure we're utilizing informed choice in the big 8. And in Colorado, that's what we call the interests, resources, capabilities, all of that. We call it the big 8. So how can we be really doing a deep dive in that comprehensive assessment in the big 8 when individuals are exploring self-employment? So we offer a variety of assessments and checklists from the beginning, with really an eye not to screen people out, but to screen people in, and to identify any skills gaps that the individuals may have early on in the process. So that maybe we realize, oh, they plan on keeping their own books, but they don't know how to use Excel or QuickBooks. Can we reach out to some partners who offer those trainings and really help folks from the very beginning, before they even dive into their business plan, to beef up some skills that they might need? So the other part that we realized that we had maybe not been doing a great job at was really educating on what being an entrepreneur means, what are the characteristics of an entrepreneur, and really what are those risks involved. You know, so many folks, the statistics are out there, we all see it, but it can take several years before a business turns over a profit. And maybe an individual can take an owner's draw. So helping the folks know, like, hey, did you know that it may be a few years before you earn a profit? Do you have the resources to support yourself while this is happening? Do you have family support? Do you have financial support? So we ask all of those questions, which can definitely be hard conversations, with, again, that eye that we want to set folks up for success, so that moving forward, they have a clear understanding of what being an entrepreneur is, and then how can we in DVR provide the resources that they need to be successful. So let's talk about what's going well in Colorado. Due to time constraints, I had to pick and choose a few, but I think we have a lot going well here in Colorado. I reached out to our counselors to ask them what they think is going well. And this is what we came up with. Mentioned earlier, we do some entrepreneurial assessments. We try to do that from the very beginning. When somebody first indicates an interest, we might use some of those great assessments that can be found online. We also developed one ourselves called the Entrepreneurial Interest Checklist, which has a variety of questions. Most of them are yes and no. Some of them require a little bit more thought and writing into it. And again, our goal really is from the very beginning to help folks think through. You know, one of our questions is, did you know you'll have to file self-employment taxes? Do you know you might not make a profit for a few years? Do you have the support to do so? And then we might dive into a little bit more of their business concept, but again, just kind of testing the waters. And I can't say enough that we're not screening anybody out, but we're trying to help folks be set up for success early on. And if we identify that they don't have very good computer skills from the very beginning, then can we, before we even dive into a business plan, help them learn some basic Word or Excel, or even sending attachments via their email. And so the earlier we learn that, we can help folks set up for success. So that's one of the reasons why we feel our process is really working well. We also never did feasibility assessments in the past. And that is something that our consultants all said, we can really improve your program. How about you look into feasibility assessments? And a shout out to Wisconsin. Thank you so much. We utilized a lot of the information that they shared with their feasibility assessment and utilize it in Colorado. And that's made a really big change for us, is really looking into whether that concept can be viable. Can it make a profit? And so the great thing about that is there's 3 levels, like green light, go for it. Yellow light, maybe there could be some training done here to kind of beef up the person so they can be successful. And then the red light is, yeah, this concept, it may not work. And this is why. And I think we hardly ever see that. So our feasibility assessments have actually saved our state money and led to more success. Another thing that's working really well is We have this amazing cadre of business consultants that work with us and the people we serve. They are so great at empowering the individuals to be fully participatory in the whole process, whether that's the feasibility assessment, researching who their customers are, researching their competitors, developing those financial statements. So that really helps us. And then the individuals we're serving really understand what's in their business plan. How are they going to operate their business? And the more they're involved from the beginning, the better. And our consultants also stay in great communication with us. That was one thing we all identified as a gap, is that early communication and often is critical. And so embracing that and empowering our consultants to know, reach out if you ever have any concerns, call immediately. How can we jump on this and move forward? And I think them knowing that has made a big difference too. A couple areas we saw that we could do better on, I mentioned earlier, was supported self-employment and youth, and streamlining our processes. And so we're seeing more supported self-employment cases, which I think is wonderful. When we're partnering with our mental health centers and our community center boards, they were initially leery about self-employment, not understanding the process, or like our counselors thinking, I don't know how to do financials. I don't know any of that. And so because we have such a great group of consultants, we can easily say, you don't have to worry about that part. You'll be doing the job coaching or the support as you always did. And we can help with the business side of things. So we moved to a 3-tier system. Several of the counselors told me that they think that that's great and it's really making a difference, and see a lot of really great success from our tier 1 and tier 2. So tier 1 is lower startup costs, right? We often typically just require a 1-page business plan, and it's reviewed by a counselor, so folks can get through it really quickly. We do think that 1-page business plan is important so that folks are really identifying, well, what are some expenses that I might have? Oh yeah, I might have to file taxes, different things like that. So we feel that process still is important. Our tier 2 is that middle ground of costs, may need a little bit more paperwork to go along with it. It might need a feasibility assessment, it might not, that's up to the counselor and the individual they're serving to really decide. And then that is reviewed by a lead counselor alongside the counselor. And our final tier, the higher tier, $6,500 and up, is reviewed by a whole team, which is made up of our lead counselors, myself, and we bring in an outside business consultant. And that has been fantastic for all of us because we learn so much more hearing from a consultant in the way they look at things when so often we're the VR side of things. And so that has made a really big difference. And that just contributes to the ongoing training that we have for our self-employment counselors. We hold quarterly meetings. Sometimes they're a day and a half. Sometimes we might break it up now virtually over a couple of days for a few hours, where we can share best practices, staff difficult cases, bring up ideas of vendors, and really just have that collaboration amongst us all. And our vendors also, some of our regions hold quarterly trainings for our vendors, our business consultants, so that we all really are all on the same page. So now that I've shared with you about what's going well, maybe we can talk a little bit about some data. I love data. I'm a government person. And so the next slide, I've just got a few highlights for data, which are these numbers were pulled from this fiscal year that began last June and ends in just a couple of days. Actually, we've served 281 individuals in our self-employment program this past year, of which 149 are in service. 34 have actually started their business, and so they're in employed status, and we've closed 60 folks successfully, which I think is really exciting. And like everyone, right, there's such a variety of creativity and business ideas out there, from folks who are selling chicken eggs or strawberries at farmers markets to massage therapists or drone photographers, just that wide range of creativity and success out there in the folks we serve. So with that, I'm just going to share a little bit about some challenges. We all have challenges, and it's great to recognize those and then wonder, well, what are some of the solutions? One of the big things that is, I'm sure we're not very much different from other states, and that's just that general understanding of counselors and feeling confident and comfortable with self-employment. And so often folks, I think, hear about self-employment. The individual comes in for that first intake meeting and says, I want to start my own food truck. And the counselor is thinking, oh my gosh, self-employment, I don't know about self-employment. I'm just going to pass you off to somebody else. And so often, I think that fear, we forget to go back to the beginning of why is somebody eligible? What are the disability related services they need? Let's talk through, that whole piece of it. And so one of our solutions has been ongoing training for all of our counselors. And we're now creating a series of micro learnings to be loaded into our learning management system based off of our policy and training manual, so that if somebody comes in and the general counselor is working and wondering, and they have to, have the individual complete what we call a self-employment questionnaire, there will be a micro learning on that, so that the counselor can look for the high points, like, what am I looking for in this? When should I send it back, and get a little bit more information? So we think something like that might help really enhance our program in the training and allow folks to really feel more comfortable with it. I'm sure many states have the same problem, finding and securing vendors in that timely manner. And so that continues to be a challenge, and our counselors are always so creative. When they might learn early on in the process that we might need a unique vendor, they start looking for it immediately and try to sign up that vendor, because it can take a few months, at least within Colorado sometimes, with coordination with the accountant at that corporation, et cetera, et cetera. So the sooner we start that process, we're not delaying any services once a plan for employment is signed. So we really like that piece. And kudos to our counselors and admin staff who really have learned how to streamline this. One of the other challenges, and it's not a bullet point on here, but which I'm sure all of you recognize as well, and that's actually helping the people we serve to understand timelines and working through things, and really understanding their responsibilities as they're about to be a business owner, and so much of this will be on them to operate their business. And so we try from the very beginning to set up clear expectations and really outline responsibilities and involve the individuals in how they're writing their business plan, right? How can they really be involved from the beginning? One of the things that we ask for is, once that business has started, we ask for a copy of their profit and loss statement each month. And that can be really challenging to get. And we need that. We need that because we're a government agency, and we need to know how much money they're making so we can close them successfully, right? So that's one reason. And the other is it really helps us if we're looking at a profit and loss statement and say, wow, it's been several months since you're not even close to a profit or breaking even. Let's see what we can do to help you. Are we missing something? And so often the case, whether it's from looking at a business, those profit and loss statements, or somebody comes back to us and says, could you guys give me some more money? I need more inventory. I'm not making a profit. It almost always goes back to one thing, and that's not following their marketing plan. That marketing plan is so important for success for any business, right? And so helping the folks understand early and often how important that marketing plan is, and that they might be responsible for a lot of that marketing if they want business coming in, if they want to make a profit. And so helping folks with that. And so sometimes we may be able to provide and authorize for business coaching to help dive in to see what's happening with that business, and is there a way to move it to success, or refer to the Small Business Development Center for help with marketing, different things like that. So that continues to be a challenge for us. And I'm excited to hear from Jim in Washington of what challenges they might have. My very last slide provided some resources. We all know we can't do this by ourselves. So there's so many resources out there. we created a page on our website specific to self-employment where we have basic information for folks who want to pursue self-employment, and all of our documents that we use, so our vendors and the folks we serve can access them. We have this great one-page desk aid so that folks can just take a look at that and be like, oh, these are the processes that we'll go through and different things like that. A huge shout out again to Montana's Rural Technical Assistance Center. If nobody knows about this, it's so wonderful. They have this online self-employment guide, which is a really a curriculum of 8 chapters to walk through self-employment. And it's so, I think, applicable no matter what state in which you're currently living. It's wonderful for counselors to get their mind around self-employment and the people we serve. Because it really goes through your process, maybe a little bit different, but there's enough generality there that it's really helpful. So we love it here in Colorado. We also have links to our small business development centers and free e-learning classes from the Small Business Development Center, things like that are just so important to set up folks so they're successful. So just wanted to share this with you. And I'm going to stop now and turn it back to Jim O'Brien from Washington, who's going to share a little bit more about his processes. And thank you all.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. Wow, that's impressive. You're doing some great things in Colorado, and there's some things for me to take away and bring back to Washington from that. I think that there are some similarities as well, which is nice to hear, especially since it seems like you've been so successful. So thanks for inviting me. James O'Brien, I go by Jim as well. I am a supervisor with Washington State Division of Vocational Rehabilitation, DVR. I'm also our point person at Washington State for self-employment, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. If we can go to the next slide. So in Washington State, some things that work for us. We recognized some time ago after our last policy revision that VR counselors are really asked to have a little knowledge about a lot of things. And so that's a huge expectation of them. And when it comes to self-employment is not their skill set. They didn't go to business school. Many of them have probably never been self-employed before. If we think about the values that come with employment and civil service and safety and being risk averse, maybe to some degree, a state employee is not the best person to be assessing entrepreneurship. So we decided that we wanted to provide support and guidance and infrastructure, training to support them in doing their jobs so that they feel competent and that they feel comfortable in helping a customer through the process, rather than relying on them to be the person responsible for walking a person through all of the steps of self-employment. From a leadership standpoint, we have in policy, supportive and encouraging language, and leadership supports that. We have a point person for self-employment. Currently, that's me, and it has been for, well, a couple of decades now. And that leadership is both formal and informal. I once had a role within VR where it was a formal part of my job description. And then in transitioning to other roles, it just kind of stuck with me. And so now it's an informal part of my job. But it's important to have, we believe, someone that always has sort of attention focused on self-employment, whether it's from a tool standpoint, a policy standpoint, a staff support standpoint. So someone that's a champion and always sort of leading the way around self-employment is important, and that's worked for us. As I said, our policy is encouraging and supportive. It doesn't in any way suggest that self-employment is a last option. It's an option like any other option. And we tried to remove any language in our policy that could be perceived as a barrier for counselors. So some things that we've changed over the years, we removed any requirement for investment from a customer. So there is no required contribution from a customer in any way, financial or otherwise. We have with Colorado, they have a tier system. So we have what we sort of refer to as a quick start option. So if a a business is rather easy to start, fairly turnkey, and is under a $3,000 startup, we don't require a step to go on to a comprehensive business plan. All we will require is the feasibility analysis to guide us. And so that helps us speed the process to start up and allows for a lot more flexibility. We no longer have a screening committee. At one time, we did have a formal screening committee. The customer would come and present their plan to this committee, but we found our experience with that was it was a committee of individuals who really didn't have the expertise themselves to be adequately unbiased in their screening, and it was just a coordination challenge. It slowed the process down, and at times it was really overwhelming for the customer. We have customers with a variety of disabilities, as you all know, and presenting to a group of bureaucrats was sometimes really stressful for that person. So we eliminated our group committee, and we feel that that has been successful for us. We do utilize approved business consultants as well in Washington State, again, sort of removing that skill set from the VR counselor. And so we do maintain a cohort of approved self-employment consultants, experts in the field, and we contract for 3 specific services: feasibility analysis, business plan when that's needed, and then startup monitoring and support. Now, the feasibility analysis does include a pre-step, which is an assessment step. So sometimes as a result of the assessment step, we won't move into feasibility analysis. And the startup monitoring and support, that is a step that from the time that we approve the venture and we move into startup, we keep that consultant on board to follow that person from startup through until successful case closure. And we will pay them for that time. So sometimes that's referred to by some as business coaching. For us, it's just startup monitoring and support. We saw a history previously where we would approve it, we'd start buying things, and counselors would step away, and customers would then start to struggle, knowing where to start, the first thing to purchase, what comes first, the business license or my business card, just making sense of where to start. Having that support and that guidance has been really, really critical. And it has improved our outcomes by having that same consultant on board. And that is one thing that I want to mention, is that with our consultants and these steps of feasibility analysis, business plan, and startup monitoring, it is always the same consultant. We don't switch consultants at any point unless there's some reason to, but so that things go according to plan, we keep the same consultant on board that started the process. Also, a real important part for us was simplifying our purchasing process. Our purchase order, we call it authorization for purchase here in Washington State, limits us in who we can work with. We have to sign up vendors. It's a process. Some companies, some people don't want to be a vendor of the state for whatever reason. We understand that. So we were limiting our options for our customers by requiring that. So we improved greatly our purchasing options when we moved to having a Visa card. So we have a Visa card now, that's state Visa, but we can use it for customer purchases. And in instances where our Visa card can't be used because maybe the website that we're making the purchase through will capture our Visa number, which we can't do, or it's a situation where it's potentially a recurring subscription, and so our Visa can't be tied to a recurring subscription. We now have what's referred to as a single-use Visa, and we're just piloting this now. But what it allows for is us to work with our customer. They download an app on their mobile device, and then with that app, and they must have an email address, we then can approve funds that they receive via the app, and it provides them with a Visa number for them to use, but specifically for that amount. So then they can go and make their own purchase, and we don't have to try and figure out how to use our Visa card number. So that was a real exciting opportunity for us. And it's also allowed us to use, of course, we're here in Seattle, so Amazon is present. We have Amazon business accounts that we use, and we make purchases with our visa through that. So that has been a real game changer for us in being able to speed up our purchasing and make purchases using the least cost options, and also just a lot more flexibility in the number of vendors that we can choose to support that customer. So we can go on to the next slide. Resources and tools. So internally, we have an intranet site. And on that intranet site, we have a self-employment section. In that self-employment section, we provide a number of tools for staff to utilize. There's a flow chart of the entire process that is really useful to go through with every customer as they're starting the process. It's sort of like when you go for a hike, you don't just show up at a trailhead and start walking into the woods. Everybody has a starting point, an ending point. We know where we're going. So they can, as part of informed choice, guide the customer through what they have to look forward to. It engages them in that process. Also helps them understand timelines and expectations. We also provide, there's an article called the DVR business model, and it's written in a way to be encouraging, but also explain some of the realities around self-employment. It's an article for both the customer and the consultant to read and then have a conversation around. Also on the intranet site, we have links to other assessments and tools that aren't necessarily required, but are available for them to use. Also some online trainings, how to read financials, and some other things that the counselors can choose to seek out if interested. We provide some templates for our contracted services. We call them service delivery outcome plans, because we use the same service delivery outcome plans with our community rehabilitation program providers. So again, it's what counselors already know. But these SDOPs, as we refer to them, are specific to self-employment. So we have one for feasibility, one for business plan, and one for monitoring and support. And it outlines the roles of each person, the counselor, the consultant, the customer in that process, timelines, deliverables, what we're paying. And again, it supports the informed choice process and also helps keep everyone on the same page. We have assessment resources, as I said, but again, the assessment resources that we have available to staff are really targeted at what they can do while still staying within their role and not stepping into the role of business consultant. So the tools that have feasibility focus are really focused more on the feasibility around assessing the disability barriers, disability-related barriers, the disability implications, and some of the other things that really are within the skill set of the counselor, as opposed to moving into a break-even analysis and looking at financials and so forth. Training, we provide internal training to all staff at least once a year, but sometimes sort of on demand. There is an internal training that we provide to staff. The focus of our internal training isn't, again, to train them on how to be a business consultant or how to do feasibility or write a business plan. It's how to get comfortable with the process, how to gain confidence so that when somebody comes to you and says, I want to be self-employed and start a food truck, that they don't get overwhelmed and that they don't do something just to buy some time, that they actually know where to start, can engage in some meaningful conversation and feel confident. There's, again, nothing worse than feeling sort of incompetent in your role. And so the focus of our training is really just getting them comfortable, confident, familiar with our process and what to do next. We provide technical assistance to our consultants as needed. Whenever there's a policy change or something that is important to them, we make sure we let them know as well so that they can provide the best service to our customers. And next slide. Some things that we found that don't work: saying no too soon. And often that has to do with something that's value-based. A counselor who themselves struggles to understand why somebody would want to be self-employed, or has heard all the numbers, the scary numbers about the rate of failure of small businesses. So sometimes saying no too soon comes back to get them in terms of call from the client assistance program or a fair hearing. So we really try to get counselors comfortable enough to explore and start the process and give the benefit of the doubt and at least take a look at things before saying no. Saying yes too soon can also be a problem. Skipping past their expertise in assessing whether or not there are disability limitations that should be talked about and considered, exploring those disability related barriers, and is self-employment really going to be a good match for those? And instead just going directly to a consultant and hoping that the business consultant will address those issues when that's not the role of the business consultant. So again, making sure that we're not saying yes too soon and skipping that important step. And then there are times where saying we're going right to a consultant immediately, it makes the customer sometimes believe that we're already endorsing it, we're already approving it, and often that's not our intent. We're moving to feasibility first, but we haven't had time to really have that conversation and all get on the same page. It doesn't work well when the counselor doesn't take time to discuss the process and timelines and what can be expected. So again, we've helped with that by creating the flow chart that is usable for the counselor and having that conversation. Really important step. We've found that it doesn't work if the counselor, again, doesn't have the support initially from, or the client, I'm sorry, doesn't have the support from the VRC in that startup stage. So we want to make sure that a counselor understands that self-employment will sometimes take more of your time. It will take an investment of your time, especially up front, to get things started. So plan for that. We've seen where timeliness of service issues occur when counselors, again, aren't comfortable, they don't know what to do next, so they'll get a report back, whether it's feasibility analysis or a business plan, and because of their lack of confidence, they get sort of the analysis paralysis. It ends up on the back of the desk. They don't know what to do next. They've sort of read it, but they're now stuck, and we want to make sure that they have the support so they know what to do next, so it doesn't just sit on the back of their desk. Speeding up our purchasing process definitely helped with that and speeding up the timeliness of our services. And it's just, we again provide training to support them in helping get comfortable along the way. Next slide. And if anyone has any questions about anything here in Washington State, please reach out to me. I have had a number of states reach out and have questions about our Visa card. So that seems to have been an area of interest. So welcome anyone reaching out. So thanks for your time today.
Jennifer and James, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure just to hear about the work that's taking place in states. And I know that each of you could go on for hours. And I think, whether we are talking about supported employment, connecting with businesses, connecting around self-employment, that our trusted sources are the other people who are doing this work. So I know for other VR agencies, your most trusted companions are other state VR agencies, right? So thank you so much for sharing. I want to point out just some consistencies that I picked up in both of you sharing, that there's variance that occurs in each of your states. However, there are some consistent pieces as well. And one of the consistent pieces I picked up on is that there's ownership in each of your organizations around self-employment. How do you, for states that maybe don't have that internal expertise or point person, how do you start that? And Jennifer, maybe we'll go to you first, and then Jim.
I would look for passion. Is there an individual out there? Is there a counselor? Is there a supervisor who is championing self-employment as a viable, competitive, integrated employment outcome, right? So look to your champions, look for passion. Who might have that passion? I think Jim mentioned, or in a different conversation, that he has been his point person for quite a while and is now in different roles. And so I bring that up because maybe it's a counselor who's very passionate about self-employment. And might that be a leadership opportunity and a growth opportunity for that individual to take more of a point in your state? I think it's really critical to have a point person, because as Jim said so well, and I was touching on, self-employment is overwhelming and scary for our counselors. I hear all the time, I didn't do math. I don't know how to do math. I'm a counselor, right? And so having somebody who is at least comfortable and who is passionate, look for that person. And then might you be able to get support from outside, from our small business development center, maybe from a community college or a college. I think there's a lot of different ways to maybe bring in some expertise and technical assistance. Ashlea, your program, your technical assistance center, right? I think there's many ways. Thank you.
Absolutely, I agree. I do believe that, again, one of the things that has worked well for us is having a point person. And so I would encourage leadership in whatever state to take a look at their program and designate someone either formally or find somebody informally who does have that passion and that commitment. As I said, in my case, over a couple of decades ago, it was part of a job that I had, but as a result of that, I developed the commitment and the passion to it and have just continued to assume that role. And so the agency knows that there is somebody within the program that can model the way and lead our program. I think also it's important to find ways to integrate that person into the microenterprise community. So attending here in Washington State, I would regularly attend the Washington State Microenterprise Association meetings, other local community-based meetings that focus on self-employment, interact with the other organizations that support microenterprise, whether they're disability focused or not, just so you get exposure to the bigger picture of self-employment. Small business development centers and SCORE volunteers have a role. There are some limits with those programs. They don't have the disability focus, but we can learn a lot from them. I spent a year mentoring with the director of a small business development center through an executive mentorship program that we had at Washington State at one time. So again, just looking for those opportunities to get on the inner circle, be part of that microenterprise sort of world. And then it helps you with your work internally at VR and making change and then shaping our policies.
Excellent. I love that. And particularly having mentorship from your community members and building those skills internally, but also through external relationships as well. You both talked about the importance of training in your organizations and also that the overwhelm of counselors having so much on their plates, and the idea of self-employment being kind of big and vague and the unknown. Talk about, or maybe share some recommendations for states too that maybe don't have that training established. Where do you start? And again, we'll go in the same order.
I think it would go back to, even what we talked about of having the ownership. If you can identify a point person with passion and some understanding of self-employment, would be the first part, so that you can coordinate easily across the state. And so I think we both touched on specific self-employment training for those counselors who may carry those cases, as well as helping our general counselors feel much more comfortable. So I think there's a variety of places to start. I think it's just diving in, looking at the needs of your agency, having the leadership commitment that supports self-employment as a viable option, I think is always really important. And so how can you build that? We are lucky enough here in Colorado, we have an internal professional development team who helps our internal trainings across the state for all of our positions, and maybe partnering with them along with some folks, again, who have that internal knowledge and commitment for self-employment, and partnering and just beginning to develop maybe some simple curriculum, or even having a conversation. So often, I think that's the first part to start, is have an open conversation with your counselors, with your admins, with your supervisors about what do they think about self-employment, what's working, what's not, what's frightening, and use that as a basis to begin moving forward. And then reach out to some other states. We are also so happy to share what we're doing and our resources in our time, right, ourselves. So I am so happy and have talked to other states as well. And whatever we can do to support you, we're happy to come in and provide some assistance.
Yeah, I agree. I think with designing training, it would also be important to remember that, again, staying within our lane, as I like to say, staying within our skill set, that our training doesn't have to be training on how to teach counselors, at least here in Washington, how to do a feasibility analysis or write a business plan. Our training is focused on things that we do know and that we do well, but also then building some self-employment components into that, so that, again, it just helps them become comfortable with the process. And in building in those self-employment pieces, reaching out to subject matter experts in the community. Here in Washington, the curriculum that I do all of the internal statewide training around self-employment, but I got help in developing that curriculum some time back through my connections with the Small Business Development Center. I partnered with one of their business specialists, and together we wrote the curriculum. It's been modified, obviously, a number of times, but I leaned on other people with that subject matter expertise.
Excellent. I love how both of you have addressed that as counselors, that the training doesn't have to necessarily be the skill piece. Skill is part of it, but that so much of a person's, a VR customer's access is relying on that counselor. And so supporting that counselor to address their own fears or bias around self-employment, I think is just really effective. And I love how both of you have touched on that. And then having the expertise available and resources so that people know, counselors know where to reach out for that expertise and help. So.
And you just touched on another important part. It's, again, recognizing that it seems scary and sort of dispelling the myth that it's too expensive and it's high risk. And that's where a lot of people go. And that comes back to that value-based decision-making that I think is happening sometimes, or they believe the scary numbers, and bringing some reality to that. I also, just a plug for anyone who's listening, who's connected to Masters in Rehab Counseling programs. I would love to see that be a regular part of a Masters in Rehab Counseling program, that they get exposed to a self-employment curriculum. Now, there is a resource that people can access through you, Ashlea, for a curriculum. And here in Washington State, through a connection of one of my staff now, who used to be a business consultant for us, he came to the other side. He helped take that to his Masters in Rehab Counseling program. And for the first time, they did incorporate a piece of that this year into their master's program. And the feedback was great. So that would be something to think about, that they're exposed to that in their graduate training and their preparation to be a counselor. So it's not entirely new when they come to VR.
I love that. And thanks for sharing about the curriculum piece, Jim, as well. I could just continue this conversation, I think, for hours with both of you. So, but I know that those listening don't have hours available. So what is one thing you would want folks to know as we wrap up, or a nugget or a piece of wisdom that maybe has come to you in the last hour while we've been together that you'd like to wrap up with?
I think I'd like to wrap up with everybody from VR listening out there, that self-employment is such an important outcome that we look at for all the people we serve. It leads to so much success. It doesn't have to be scary for you as a counselor. There's a lot of support out there. And it truly just opens up so many doors for folks who maybe traditional employment may not be the best option. And instead they can find such amazing success and confidence in exploring a self-employment outcome. So that's what I'd like to leave with. It's so wonderful and a challenging and fascinating process.
I would like to leave states with, think about your policy and your process and whether or not you're intentionally or unintentionally creating barriers that don't need to exist. Trim it down, thin it down, look at the steps that are required, assess whether or not you're removing autonomy from the counselor and creating barriers for the customer to meet a step that in some way helps you with being risk averse or a fiscal purchasing limitation, and really slim the process down. Take out the barriers so that things are looked at in a thoughtful way, but also can move at the speed of business and not sometimes at the speed of VR.
Awesome. I love both of those pieces. And Jim, that reminded me of something that I was hearing about the other day, but this idea of doing less. And when but the idea of when we look at solutions to problems, that oftentimes we want to add things rather than take things away. And so I love that you touched on that, because I think naturally we always want to add a process or a piece. And so to conclude, thank you both so much, Jennifer, Jim, the state of Colorado, state of Washington. I would encourage every state to reach out to both of you. You are a wealth of knowledge and resource and expertise. So thank you so much for your time today. And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.